for this coming session. And I am joined by Themis Klarides for the Republicans, former House leader, and for the Democrats, Jimmy Tickey, a Democratic strategist. We do know that Governor Lamont is making his way down to us. We're going to have all the legislative leaders here, including the governor, First Lady Annie Lamont, everyone hearing in their own words. But thank you both for being here so we can bring this exclusive coverage to our streaming audience. It's a big day.
This is the day.
This is a big day. And Themis, I just want to, right now we're talking about this is a shorter session. That means that they have shorter periods of time till May 6th to get the legislative priorities. You just listened to the governor's speech. What are you thinking?
Well, the shorter session just means it's 3 months instead of 5 months, but it also seems that they jam 5 months worth of work into the 3 months. So almost around the same thing happens. The governor did what the governor does best. He's inclusive, he's hopeful, he says, I want to work together, and he does. And there's a reason he has an over 60% approval rating, because he does work together and people see that. But he has initiatives that cost money.
Yeah.
And that is
like
where
universal pre-K.
That is where the rubber meets the road, like free breakfast, like extending the emergency fund for what the feds are doing. Like, these things take money. So the question is, where do you get it? Do you raise taxes? Do you take money from somewhere else? And that will be the big debate during session this year.
Yeah, Jimmy, what's your take on what you just heard with the governor's speech? It did ring out to me. Much of it was, let's do this together, and contrasting a lot with the federal government, also talking about that we're going to have to pay for money we no longer get from the federal government.
Right, because we've seen the dysfunction with Washington, D.C. and this federal administration. We've seen the cuts that have really had an impact to Connecticut, to our very own programs here, whether that was food stamps or education funding or flood mitigation funding. I mean, we've seen the real difference that a federal administration can make in a state to the negative. And so I think the speech was really quintessential Ned Lamont. It was about prioritizing affordability and how can the state really work to help working people, but it also balanced that with the fiscal guardrails that he has been known to really follow, and to make sure that we balance affordability with making sure we've got this rainy day fund. The rainy day fund is for a rainy day, and many would say that we are in that rainy day right now with President Trump and the cuts that we've seen from the federal government. So I think you saw a balance of having programs for working families, but also making sure that we do keep to the guardrails that are here in Connecticut.
And guardrails, but that's $313 million, right? That's a lot of money.
That's the emergency fund money that we saw a few months back when the legislature was in session, because we see what the federal government in Washington is doing. They're making cuts, and then the state government has to backfill it. Gave money to food share, gave money to our food pantries, gave money to people that needed it because the federal government was cutting, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future.
So much like our own budgets at home, would you both agree we can't do all those things?
We can't do all those things, but it's like having a really great savings account, the best you've ever had. I mean, Connecticut has over $4 billion in a rainy day fund, and that is to avert a recession. That is to avert times where we are seeing significant cuts. And so there were proposals for some targeted investments, in this case over $300 million, to make sure that we keep some response. The state will never be able to backfill all of the cuts that come from the Fed. We never will be able to do that. So how can we best make the investments to make sure that we keep kids safe, kids well-fed, and families somewhat secure under this really tumultuous time in the federal government?
But the problem with that rainy day fund, which is the budget reserve fund, so the extra money you have, is it's not a bottomless pit. And it is flush now. It is. Thank goodness for the guardrails that we put in 2017. But remember, the Democrats have tried to push to break those guardrails too. So I think that will be an annual fight between the Democrats, the Republicans, and the governor, breaking the guardrails, because it's not a bottomless pit. You have to figure out your priorities.
If you're just joining our coverage, thank you for streaming with us on WFSB Plus and on the Wax. And this is exclusive coverage. We're live here at the state capitol. I'm Kara Sundlun, and I'm here with Jimmy Tickey for the Democrats and Themis Klarides for the Republicans, because we're going to break down all the issues that are going to matter to you from both sides of the aisle. I do want to bring up a few points that are good to know as we're waiting for the governor. He's going to be sitting with us in just a moment, so we will get to ask him ourselves about some of the points he just made, like universal free care, more affordable prescription drugs, the Connecticut option on your insurance. We're going to get to ask the governor. But here are a few points that I want to bring up. You're going to hear this called a short session in legislative terms, and that's because we're in an even-numbered year. So odd-numbered years are called long sessions, and they go from January until early June. So this year's short session runs from February 4th, that's today, until May 6th. As Themis just said, that means a lot of work, almost the same amount of work, just shorter periods of time. But the overriding intention of this short session will be to revise the second year of a 2-year budget passed in the previous year, much like you would sit down at your kitchen table and say, you know, these numbers we thought of didn't really work. We got to make some adjustments. Other urgent matters can also be addressed. And Governor Ned Lamont set the ball in motion because as he delivered his State of the State address just moments ago, I want you to hear a little bit about what he had to say as he's asking the legislature to approve some of his initiatives. Let's listen in.
And unlike many other states which are facing federal cuts or a deficit of their own, Connecticut is stepping up to protect our most vulnerable. And we're trying to make life a little less expensive for working families in the middle class who are getting slammed by higher costs.
Ending on slammed by higher cost. And that is something we're certainly going to have to talk to Governor Lamont about. It's something that all of us who live in Connecticut live every day. As we wait for Governor Lamont to come down, I am here. We are just joined by our first guest as we have Sean Scanlon here, and we're talking about money. So this is good for you, right?
Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And I want to ask, we just heard a lot about affordability, but we also heard about funding new projects. How do we reconcile those?
Well, look, affordability is the political buzzword. Every politician on the Democratic side, Republican side, that's what they're saying. The true test is what are the policies we're putting forward going to actually do to make Connecticut more affordable? There's universal recognition that it's not affordable for most people right now, and the work that we need to do is really focus on what we can do to lower energy costs, housing costs, healthcare costs. And I think you just heard a speech from the governor really laying out a pretty firm agenda of what he wants to do with the legislature this year to try to bring down those costs.
Yeah, one of the unique things about this format is we get to have both sides ask you some questions. We're here with Sean Scanlon, the state comptroller from Guilford. You okay with that?
Of course.
All right, and then I know the governor's going to be joining us in a second, so we might actually have to take a pause. But let me have you guys ask one question.
I'm used to getting bumped by the governor, so it's fine.
So Sean, you're the state comptroller. Tell people what a state comptroller does and why it's important.
Basically, the chief fiscal watchdog of the state. I pay the state's bills. We keep the state's books. I run the largest health care plan in the state of Connecticut. 250,000 people, but really working with both the legislature and the governor to try to tackle the big problems that we face here in Connecticut.
And you have talked a lot about healthcare. The governor talked a lot about healthcare too. Tell us quickly about some of the reforms that you've been trying to make with our own healthcare here in Connecticut.
Well, look, starts with driving down costs. What can we do to find efficiencies, make the cost to the taxpayers on the plan that I run lower? But what the governor talked about today and what he and I are working on together is to create what's known as the Connecticut option, allowing small businesses, nonprofits, people who are getting really hurt by the high cost of healthcare right now to have access to a new affordable plan. Anything we can do to drive down costs both on the side that we run and for everybody in the state, I think is the focus we need to have in 2026.
All right,
will
Deputy Comptroller.
Will that cost the state any money?
Right now, it's not set up to cost any state money. It's fully funded by the people who'd be buying into it, and the taxpayers would be protected.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Comptroller.
Governor Lamont is here. I would love to continue our conversation in a moment, but we want to grab Governor Lamont. Deputy Comptroller Sean Scanlon, thank you so much. We're here, and as you're joining us, this is what's so exciting about Capitol Rundown. The governor has just arrived. Governor Lamont is going to come sit with us. He's just finished giving his State of the State address. Governor, we're going to ask you to hold your own microphone on the Capitol Rundown as we stream live. Is that okay? Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
I feel like it's the 50s.
I know. Governor, thank you for being here. We just listened to your speech, and we just heard, as we said, a lot of optimism, a lot of a call for unity, a lot of working together, and a call to ask people to extend some of the funding for that. If you could pick one of those priorities that you really want to see done by May, what's the most important to you?
Let's start off, we got to keep working together. They're not working together in Hartford,
You know, it's much better if we do this. What we're trying to do on housing, what we're trying to do on affordability, bring down costs. Maybe we can work together on energy a little more constructively than we have in the past. Those are all really important. The emergency fund is just, you don't know what's going to come out of the White House in the next 6 days or 6 months. Give us a little bit of flexibility so we can respond. We've been very prudent. We've only spent a third of the money we have just because we're only making up for Trump tax cuts.
You also opened up with saying this is a time that tries our souls. And I think every day in the news people are seeing that. What do you want to say about how Connecticut is going to have to handle or break from the federal government given some of the strategies with ICE and also the funding that we're no longer getting?
Well, that's what Thomas Paine said. These are the times that try men's souls. He said it at the end of 1776. I said it, A, because it's the 250th anniversary, but also every era we have a really complicated time. This is one of those complicated times where we work together. And as Thomas Paine famously said, we need good people to stand up.
And during those difficult times, you've led us through many here in Connecticut. It was a great speech, Governor. Tell us about one of the efforts that you talked about with affordability, the $200 or the $400 tax rebate that families or individuals could expect.
Yeah, we have these very volatile capital gains. They're strong right now. I don't know what they're going to be next year, but we can afford to help people out. Say $400 for a couple. Get that. Helps you pay these very high heating costs you have in January and February. Just make life a little more affordable for people. But that's on top of what we're able to do in terms of the income tax cut, earned income tax credit, other ways you earn more and keep more of what you earn. Thanks, Jim.
Themis.
Governor, let me first applaud you, as I have before, about working together. You work with the Democrats, you work with the Republicans, and you want to do what's best for Connecticut. So your speech was very hopeful, as it usually is. But how do you plan on paying for a lot of the proposals you put in?
What I can't pay for is Republicans saying $500 billion tax cuts, we'll figure it out later, and the Republicans saying, or the Democrats saying $500 billion in tax credits. That leaves a hole in the out years. That's why I was very strict to be able to say, let's do what we can pay for right now with a $400 rebate. You know that better than anybody. It's so easy to make promises in the future that you can't keep. We've kept our promise for 7 years. I'm going to keep it.
And do you plan on sticking firm with the guardrails, as you have in the past?
I do. I mean, we've made some flexibility. For example, what we did in, the endowment for early childhood education. We've balanced the budget 7 years in a row. That doesn't happen very often in government. And we're going to keep going. People count on us to do that. Thanks,
You mentioned energy tax credits, about $400 for families. You mentioned also the insurance of the Connecticut option. For the average family, are you seeing money going back into people's pockets if all of this passes? How much will the people feel relief?
Well, you should be getting a $400 check. Assuming the legislature likes this, in the none too distant future. Healthcare is, no question, more complicated. But as I said before, some of our hospitals charge 50% more than others. If I can get state employees and retirees and small business, anybody else, to join up to this preferred network, I call it the Connecticut option, we can save you a lot of money.
And as we sit here and we're talking about all the things that matter, I know we noticed three themes of affordability, of health care. Also, I want to ask you a little outside of your speech, but the people who are watching at home are constantly emailing us about these two horrific cases of captivity, Waterbury and the little girl who was murdered by her mother, according to authorities in New Britain. Do you see that there needs to be a change in homeschooling safeguards, given that in these two high-profile crimes, they were both homeschooled, and they seem to have lost touch with DCF?
Do a much better job of honoring these kids. Sometimes Republicans like to blame DCF, sometimes Democrats like to blame homeschoolers. We have to work together. You got to keep track of these kids who don't show up at the schools on a regular basis to make sure they're safe, but don't demonize anybody.
And Governor, I know you have a proposal with the Attorney General about helping kids with social media and the algorithms, et cetera. Maybe you should talk about that a little bit.
And no phones in the school.
Right, and no phones in the school.
We were the
Bell
first to
bell.
get them out of the classrooms. I thought that was really good. Now if we can get them out of the schools, you know what? Teachers are saying, please do this. It's one thing when they don't have them in the classroom, then they run out into the hallways. But more importantly, Themis, like you said, I really feel strongly we want to empower parents to say, no, those kids aren't going to get access to some of those really dangerous algorithms, at least without parental permission.
Right, because they're being targeted, so.
And Governor, this is, by my count, I think it's your 8th state of the state. I was there for the first one. So what does a day like this still signify for you? All this pomp and circumstance and everyone getting started with the
Jimmy,
session.
It means a lot. I got the same butterflies I had when I was facing Themis, 7 years ago. It's a big deal. You have to give people a sense of why you love this state, what your vision is for the state, why they want to be in this state. And during these tricky times, a little bit of optimism, I think, is helpful.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you,
Themis,
Governor.
nice to see you. Hi, Kara.
Thank
you.
you.
Got Annie coming up, don't you?
I
She loves
think
tough
so.
questions.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
thank you, Governor Lamont. I'm talking
Very
about
much,
getting,
Governor.
because next we're having First Lady Annie Lamont on. I know she's
She
here.
loves tough questions, he said.
Those are tough questions. We need that. Governor
Thank you,
Lamont, thank you
Governor.
for your time.
Thank
Could
you
you
very
pass the
much. Thank
microphone to First Lady Annie Lamont?
Hi, First Lady.
All right, so we're here on the Capitol Rundown. We're streaming live. And Annie, thank you for being with us, First Lady Annie Lamont. And the reason why I wanted to ask you here is because we've had the opportunity to interview you before. You have a storied business career. Forbes magazine has called you one of the top 50. You are not in the background when it comes to business. What do you think Connecticut's vision for business, especially small business, needs to be?
I mean, first of all, consistency. I mean, Ned talked about it today in terms of people knowing what the rules of the road are. And I think certainly what's coming from Washington is not helpful for any business, large or small. But I think consistency and understanding where the state's going, I think having an optimistic vision, having a pro-business vision, because obviously growing the economy, growing business grows jobs. So everybody should feel good about that. Certainly there was tax credits for business entities, small business entities during the first term. I think we'll be looking more at that in the future. And it's really, I mean, so much of it is also about supporting our research and development. That was addressed in the last session in terms of life sciences and biotech. And I think they're going to be looking at R&D credits in this budget. For small business and business in general. But I also, can I just say, this child care, universal child care and universal pre-K is incredibly important for business, right? If we think about the challenges for women, working women mostly, without great child care, it's a real issue. It's an issue for my employees. It was an issue for me, raising 3 kids working. So I think that is a really important part of it, too.
Interesting how childcare, especially with women in the workforce, very much entering both spheres, business and childcare. I'll let Themis and Jimmy ask you a quick question.
So your husband says you like tough questions, and clearly he has good judgment because he married a strong woman. How do you think Connecticut's doing business-wise?
In business-wise, well, as he said, we last quarter were the fourth largest growth in the economy. We were the top 10 over the last year. We're the number 1 in New England. So I do think that we are showing by the GDP actually growing in the state. And I think people feel good about that. And more larger businesses and smaller businesses are coming to the state of Connecticut. So I'm happy about that.
Are you happy he's running again?
Yeah, he's running again. Yes, he loves it. I love what I'm doing. He loves it, loves the state of Connecticut so much. And 8 years has flown by, and I think he's got the energy and will, and he absolutely has a number of things he really wants to get done, like lowering healthcare costs, making life more affordable.
I remember when everyone was leaving Connecticut, and I had a lot of young friends that would just say, they're going to New York or they're going to Boston, and now it just seems like people are coming here, they're starting businesses here. I'm seeing cities grow, I'm seeing small towns grow with so much investments, and our LLCs are way up, and people are starting businesses here. So because you're so plugged in to the business community, both big business and small business, what do you think is the biggest need that businesses face today in Connecticut?
Yeah. Well, obviously, if you're in manufacturing, lowering energy costs is huge. And I think he's trying to do that in multiple ways in terms of getting different sources in. That's been a long-term problem here. Otherwise, I think just regulation. I mean, always an issue, and people micromanaging, and sort of legislature micromanaging. So I think that if we can take some regulations off and support our businesses better that way, it would be great.
That might be bipartisan.
I agree.
Right. Well, thank you so much, First Lady. Really appreciate you being on.
All right.
Thanks. Great to talk to you all.
First Lady Annie Lamont, thank you for joining us live streaming on the Capitol Rundown. We appreciate it. And this is live TV as you're watching us. Thank you for joining us to stream. And next, I would like to bring in Vincent Candelora, House Minority Leader, North Branford. I know he served some time as a Republican with Themis Klarides when she was House Leader.
Just a few years.
Yeah, just a few. Thank you so much for being here. And as we've been talking about the theme of affordability, do you agree with the governor's initiatives, or where do you differ, I guess, would be the better question?
Yeah, I don't
We
think
don't have all day.
I don't think it's bold enough. I think we really have to address the issue of electric rates in a more meaningful way. I think a tax rebate is temporary. We would like to see a structural change. In my local communities, when I see education budgets failing by 80-90% of the vote because people are saying they cannot afford their local property taxes anymore, we really have a crisis. And the state has had billions and billions of dollars flowing in. We're just not getting it to the people.
Okay. Themis?
And then of all the proposals that we saw the governor put out today and that you're seeing going through the session, we talk about this all the time. We agree on a lot of the topics, but the question is, how do we get there? Where do you get the money? Where do you money to fund universal, pre-K, universal health care, all these things that sound great, but the money has to come from somewhere. So what do you think realistically can be done this session as far as funding?
Yeah, I think what we've seen happen right now is we have a budget that has pulled almost $3 billion from our volatility cap. That's growing government. So government's working for itself. It's not working for the people. We really have to talk about tax reform. There is a way, I think, that we could create a more robust property tax credit. We've proposed to the tune of $1,000. We have to look at education dollars. We need to put more money into education. And I think the health care reform is in the wrong direction. Universal health care is not going to work. Government doesn't do anything efficiently. We all know that. And so to say that we're now going to institute more government health care is dangerous. We've got to rely on the private sector in order to prop up. We've got to look at Medicaid rates. We're only reimbursing at 62 cents on the dollar. We've gone almost 20 years without appropriate adjustments. So Connecticut has one of the lowest reimbursement rates for health care across the country, and we're losing our specialists. So I think there's a lot on our plate that we have to try to tackle. I don't think this budget meets that moment.
On one hand, you talk about it not being bold enough, but also cautioning against some of the financials. So is there anything that you heard in today's State of the State that you think your members would get behind? Is it perhaps some of the early childhood?
Yeah, there's small pieces. We certainly support the early childhood initiatives. We would not have funded it on surplus. We would have done it through the budget process, and that's what our proposal last year would have done. And what we're seeing right now is there was supposed to be $300 million transferred into early childhood this year. Our surplus is only $80 million right now. So there's some gimmicks in this budget to try to put more money into it. But it's just showing it's unsustainable to be relying on surplus dollars to fund a government program. So those are the things that really need to be a priority, but they need to fall on the budget. And that means making the hard choices, which the Democrats have not done a good job of. COVID really spoiled them in that they were able to be all for everybody. There's a lot of money flowing around. That money is gone. We have to make more difficult decisions.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, to bring your views from your side of the aisle, as I know the governor has called for bipartisan agreement and how we're going to get through this. So we really appreciate you taking the time so we can understand the issues. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And as we're streaming live here on the Capitol Rundown, if you're just joining us right now, we're going to be on from 1 to 3, and I'm here with our insiders from both sides of the aisle, Themis Klarides for the Republicans, Jimmy Tickey for the Democrats. We're bringing all of the people who are making the policies in your town. And let's go to the capital city, because we have Mayor Arunan Arulampalam. Thank you for being here. The governor gave you a shout-out in his speech as we talked about affordable housing, which is a big issue. is that your priority? Or I should say, what is your priority and how will it dovetail with any money or support you're going to get from the state in the next until May?
Yeah, well, look, I think that's a priority for all of our towns. First of all, thank you for having me. Thanks for coming to the capital city. It's great to be here. I think I kind of straddle both sides of the aisle because Themis is in my family, but it is great to have you here. I will tell you, we had a breakfast this morning with about 20 mayors from across the state, Democrats and Republicans. Everybody's talking about housing affordability for all of our communities. In places like Hartford, where there are generations of residents who have been locked out of access to home ownership, where there are so many residents who are just having trouble affording the basic price of their homes, where they're worried about the conditions of those houses, to places across the state where people are wondering if their kids are going to be able to come back and settle down in their communities, where they're wondering if elderly folks can grow old and continue to live in those communities. I think we're all focused on housing affordability. And I'd say, the two things that I've focused on since my first day in office are housing affordability and our youth, our young people, both creating positive opportunities for our young people and a pipeline to opportunity, but also our schools. Our schools in Hartford are really struggling, and I think that's something...
Before I turn it over to the insiders, another big issue that we get writing into the news station all the time, and as a resident of Hartford for some 25 years, there are so many good things going on in the city. We need to tell that story. But people are also concerned in any city about crime. Yeah. And what is your initiative? How do we get a handle? The worse the economy gets, the more it seems that we're afflicted, even if it's petty crime.
Yeah, look, we have actually made historic gains when it comes to crime in the capital city. We've cut our homicide rate in half over last year. Our shootings are down to the lowest numbers we've ever seen on record, and last year was a record. This year was another record. We actually, in the past year in Hartford, it's been more dangerous to be in a car than to have be hit by a gunshot. We had more people killed in car crashes in the city of Hartford than we did from gunshot wounds in the city of Hartford. And so we've made historic gains by being able to bring our community together with our police, getting smart on crime, being a lot smarter in the technology we have in policing, connecting that with community resources and getting to those folks who we know are most likely to commit crimes ahead of time. That was done because of huge investment by the Biden administration in crime prevention in cities like Hartford, and that investment has gone away in this administration. We've tried to help carry the ball from the city's budget, and it's tough, but it's something that we talk about a lot with the governor. All of our cities are seeing historic drops in crime across the country, and Hartford is no exception. I think if this administration wants to see what it takes to make cities safe, they should come to places like Hartford and see what's happening on the ground, because it's really remarkable.
So I'm going to turn it over to Themis, and for our audience, just so that you all know, when you mentioned she's also my family, Themis is also your mother-in-law, even though you are on opposite sides of the aisle.
Even though I look so young.
Yeah. All right, so Themis, you go ahead and question your son-in-law.
Why do you think Hartford's crime rate has gone down more than other cities? I mean, you mentioned the investment the Biden administration made, and they made it in all cities. But you have stuck out, obviously in a good way, right? Which is nice to see. And what do you think you're doing? I mean, I know you mentioned some of your initiatives, but with that money given, how come other cities haven't?
There's a combination of things. So the technology in policing has helped a lot. We have, and it's not hyperbole, one of the 2 or 3 best crime centers, real-time crime centers in the country. And so the video technology, the shot spotter technology, we found when there is video evidence of a shooting when it happens, the solvability rate goes up 383%. So being able to solve those crimes, being able to catch those perpetrators early has been huge. We've also been able to, connecting that real-time crime center with our community of violence interrupters at the ground level, identify those who are most likely to commit crimes. We know in every community, it's about 0.2 to 0.3% of people who commit almost all of the violent crimes. And if we can identify those people early and plug them with resources early, that's so key. And so we have in our hospitals a hospital-based violence intervention program where as soon as a gunshot victim comes in, we push all the community resources we can to them. We triage them with community resources so that doesn't turn into a cycle of violence. And we've found that's been incredible in being able to bring down the rate of group and gang violence in the city of Hartford. And it's harder to control things like domestic violence. It's harder to control things like personal disputes, but group or gang violence has gone down very close to zero in the city of Hartford, and that's really led to that drop in crime.
And have you been sharing the things that work with your fellow mayors?
it's something that we all talk about. We've had a lot of mayors, both from the state of Connecticut and actually other states, come and check out a real-time crime center and try to make those investments. It's also that network of community-based violence intervention providers. We created an Office of Violence Prevention. We held a conference for regional offices of violence prevention, violence interruption folks to try to work together and share best practices. We're always trying to improve that access and that information, because the better that every other city around us does, the better that we do as a community.
Mayor, I wanted to ask you something you said at the top, I think for people that may not understand how politics works. You said there was a breakfast with mayors earlier this morning. So we're at the state legislature where the House and the Senate will meet over the coming months. Why is it important for mayors who are the CEOs of their towns to get involved in state legislation for the folks who are making state laws?
Well, look, I think that connecting the policymaking that is happening to the work on the ground is so essential. Also, getting feedback from what mayors need, what individual communities need, is so important. And collectively, we have, I think, a much stronger voice. We represent a diverse group of communities, both Republican and Democrat, both big cities and smaller towns. But being able to bring that voice up here together, I think has been really powerful. And this is the second year we've done it. We did the breakfast last year. Once again, we're going to go up to the governor's office in a minute, meet together and talk about our priorities. There are things that are going to be individual to each of our individual cities that we are going to work on. But we want to have a collective voice around things like education that impact all of us, and that we all want to see a state like, look, we have the most expensive and the least equitable way of doing education in this state. We've chosen that. And we can potentially make a different choice as a state. And can we work together as mayors, as Board of Eds, as a state legislature to change the way in which we fund education, change the way in which we invest in the future of our kids?
Mayor Runenauer Lumplum, thank you for taking the time. Mayor of our capital city, Hartford, talking about crime and education. I know you have several children, and they're all students in Hartford.
That's
so
right.
You're
That's
living
right.
it.
Yeah.
You're living it. So thank you. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
This is, as we're live here at the state capitol on Capitol Rundown, we are exclusively streaming for you to bring you the issues that matter to you and give you perspective from both sides of the aisle, hopefully to create some unity, some action. And I'm now here with Speaker of the House, Matt Ritter.
Hi, everybody. Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
Who has been a lifelong resident of Hartford, who's just come out also of the chamber, where we're hearing these priorities, which I imagine your priorities are in line with the governor's, of affordability and health care, decoupling from the federal government. But you also have a unique perspective because you are a resident of the city of Hartford, as we just talked to the mayor. If there's one thing that you want to zero in on, we know priorities matter. What's one thing you want to zero in on?
I think we got to figure out how we're going to spend this money to help people and help our residents. So the governor talked about an energy rebate. I have a caucus that's talked about child tax credits. I've heard about increased education cost sharing money, which helps the Hartford Board of Education. I've heard about pilot payment in lieu of taxes. There's a conversation about how we're going to spend certain revenues. How we do that will be the discussion, right? I think that you're going to get a lot of ideas, and we're going to have to compromise and make it work.
We talked about with Leader Candelora, and obviously I lived this for many years, we all agree on most topics. It's how we get there, how we fund them. So there are a lot of great ideas in the governor's proposals, and I know we can't. Where do you plan on getting the money?
Yeah, so we'll probably have to raise the volatility threshold. I know that people watching this at home, they go, what on earth is the volatility threshold?
Yeah.
The bottom line is we have different rules and restrictions on how we can use certain income tax and capital gain revenue. To spend this $500 million, whether you do the governor's plan or someone else's plan, you'll have to raise that, and that requires 91 votes in the House and a different majority in the Senate as well. So we did it last year, we'll have to do it again. Yep.
And Speaker, your leadership style has really been one where you've gotten balanced budgets. You've often done that before that bell strikes midnight, doing it ahead of schedule, really no drama, keeping your caucus together. So how do you approach a session like this? It's opening day. We're going to be here now for the coming months. How do you approach a new session with the priorities you heard today from the governor?
I mean, you have to set expectations, right? I mean, you have to be the parent in the room. Themis was the parent in her caucus at one point. You have 62 days. You have two chambers. You have a governor. You have to set to the chairs of the committees. You might only get one bill. That's all you may get, so you have to prioritize. So it's just like when I talk to Jack and Emma. You have to prioritize. We can't do everything. You got to pick and choose what you're going to do. Same with legislators.
The governor seems to be prioritizing a few things. He wants to improve education. He wants to give universal pre-care and free breakfast. I know from experience, as my children went to Harvard magnet schools, many of those kids in Hartford are already getting all free meals. Can we afford to do that? Is that something you see happening that people are going to notice right away?
Yeah, so you raise a good point. A lot of school districts, particularly the larger cities, it's already free anyway. It's free breakfast and free lunch. But there are some communities that don't get it, or certain schools get it and certain ones don't. The free breakfast is about $13 million to provide statewide. Yeah, we can afford that. Again, you got to prioritize, but I think we can make that work in our budget. But you got to go to the caucus and the approach chairs and see what else they want to fund, and then you got to make it all work. Yeah.
But you mentioned changing the volatility cap again, which you did last year. This goes back to the guardrails. You know, basically for the people at home, it's, you know, what you can afford to pay, what can you afford to borrow, how much you can spend, etc. How many times are you going to keep going back? Because at a certain point, there's no guardrail left when you keep changing that threshold, and that's what got us in a budget deficit for those many years to begin with.
Yeah, I will tell you, it's not the argument coming from the Republicans. Right now, the Republicans are mad at us for not spending more money from the guardrails. So it's sort of ironic how that's changed over the years. Look, we're still going to pay our pension. We're still going to put over $1 billion in extra money in the pension fund. But there's a conversation around affordability and how much can you give back. So the House Republicans' plan is $700 million, comes from the same pot of money. The governor's is $500, same pot of money. So everybody's doing it, doesn't make it right. But I'll be comfortable if I know we're still putting $1 billion in the pension fund, and we pay the ARC. We pay what the actuaries tell us to pay. That happened for the first time in Connecticut history in 2011. The pension fund started in the 1930s. That's how irresponsible Connecticut was. We will not go back to those days.
House Speaker, House Speaker Matt Ritter, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you being here.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
We're bringing you the voices that matter to you right into your living rooms as we stream live here on WFSB Plus, live on the first day of the session at the Capitol. We'll be asking the questions we hope that matter to you, from Themis for the Republicans, Jimmy for the Democrats, and myself moderating. Attorney General William Tong is here. And thank you for being with us, sir. I know you've been, the governor's theme a lot was decoupling from the federal government. And you've had to do this in some ways. You've been suing the federal government, saying that things don't work or things aren't fair. As you're facing the Trump administration, people are concerned. We've had rallies about ICE issues, and yet there are others who really want to make sure we don't have illegal immigrants here. What's going to be your strategy to implement these ideals of how does Connecticut move ahead without some of these federal priorities and even challenge them?
We're going to fight every single day. I've now sued the president in this second term almost 50 times. That's on top of the more than 100 times the first time. And Themis is a lawyer. We're winning most of these cases because on the law, we are right. The president doesn't have the power, for example, to cut off food stamps right before Thanksgiving. Not just cruel, but depraved to do that. And so my strategy is, everybody knows my strategy. As soon as Connecticut is hurt or impacted and Connecticut residents and families and children have a target on their backs, I'm going to act.
Okay. So I want to also bring up something that we've talked a lot about on the Capitol Rundown. You've come on and talked about on Great Day Connecticut and run a PSA. As a mom of teens, I know we're all talking about it. There's a lot of unregulated pot at the gas station, at the convenience store. I was mentioning this to a dad the other day. He wasn't even aware that some of those things that look like candy is marijuana that the kids are buying. And I know that's a big issue for you, but I want you to, number one, bring parents up to speed, but also how are you going to enforce it so that my 16-year-old can't go to a gas station and see it?
So I have 19, 17, and 14, and I care very much about keeping them safe. Here's the bottom line. Just because we have adult use cannabis in this state doesn't mean you can sell or buy or use whatever the hell you want. That's not what it means. And unfortunately, we have this proliferation of illicit cannabis, illicit nicotine products, things that are untested, unsafe, that look like snack foods. We've all seen the Cheetos bags that have edibles in them. Themis and I expressed concern about this before the law passed, and here we are. So we have to take action. Cities and towns have to deploy police to stop these smoke shops and vapes from breaking the law.
So that means more enforcement?
More enforcement. We're involved in a bunch of raids. We partner with local cities and towns, and we've got to crack down on this across the state.
Well, I will reiterate that we were worried about this years ago when it first came up. Tell me this, though. We do have a law. We do have an adult cannabis law. And what is the difference between now just enforcing the laws we have on the books versus what you're doing? Because clearly we've talked about how they're targeting kids and how they're selling in convenience stores and gas stations, etc., and they're not supposed to already be doing that. So what's the difference between putting new laws in versus just getting people like on the ball and saying we have to enforce the laws we have?
Well, what we're doing now is we've passed a lot of laws to give police, cities, and towns the power. They have powers now over the last couple of years they didn't have before. Frankly, if they go and raid a smoke shop or a vape shop and they're breaking the law and they get a financial penalty, the city or town gets to keep all the money. The state doesn't take any. And they can take action against landlords. What I think we have to do now is say, okay, now you all are on notice. So we're going to give you some short period of time. Everybody clean up your act. You now have X period of time to clean up your act. And if you don't, we're going to go statewide crackdown and shut people down, put chains on the doors, lock the doors, and shut you down and put you out of business forever.
And that money that's going to towns now, before they were splitting it with the state, right? Yes, so that's another incentive for the towns to say, listen, we really have to make sure we do this.
General, talk to us about some of the social media legislation that has been introduced and the governor talked about today. I know you've been very passionate about protecting students, children, and also privacy.
Yeah, as you know, the state has sued Meta, Instagram, Facebook for purposefully trying to get all of us and our children addicted to our devices. That's how they make money. They keep us glued to our devices. And the way they keep kids glued to their devices is by sending them stuff they shouldn't see, right? Shocking, controversial, things they're not supposed to look at. That's what makes you want to look at it. And guess what? The machine, the AI, learns that. And Facebook knows this, Instagram knows this, TikTok knows this, and they purposefully try to addict our kids, which is why we're suing. But litigation takes a long time. It's not a good way to set policy. So the governor and I have introduced a bill again, which we think is really important. There's going to be a lot of resistance by industry, okay, to keep kids away from these algorithms and algorithmic platforms unless their parents consent.
Attorney General William Tong, thank you so much for making us aware here. We are bringing you voices from the Capitol, and maybe you didn't even realize that there's dangerous pot and zins and nicotine that your kids might be getting into, but look for that in your local convenience store. So thank you for talking about more enforcement that matters to parents. Next up, I'm going to bring our chief political reporter, Susan Raff, who has just gotten down from the chamber where she was listening to Governor Lamont's State of the State address, as we all were. Susan, I don't think there was a lot of surprise. He seemed to touch on the things that you've been reporting on for the last several weeks. What's the mood up there? What are you getting from this?
Well, I think Themis will understand. It's always like the tale of two speeches, right? People get very excited to come here. It's a big day. The governor makes his speech, and after there's a lot of feedback and pushback. So I think it's kind of a mixed bag as far as Republicans and Democrats. But the one thing that everyone seems to agree on is the unpredictability of the federal government and the issue for lawmakers. How do you balance a budget? How much money can you give cities and towns? And I think that's a big issue this year. The governor talked about tax rebates. That's a feel-good measure, right? I mean, he's running for re-election. But is that enough to address affordability here in Connecticut? No doubt, though, that the ICE mention in the governor's speech caused the most uproar, if you will. Democrats all on their feet, chanting and cheering. But many Republicans feel that that is just going a little too far. The governor said, go home. And Republicans feel that, that there are people who are in this country illegally, and we need to send them back to where they came from. But I think, again, this is the devil is in the details with many of the budgets, and we're going to have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah. Themis, I know you might want to talk to Susan.
We're switching roles now. It is the tale of two speeches, and the governor does what he does well, right? He goes out there and he gives people hope, and he wants to work together, and he has worked together in a lot of ways. That's why he's so popular still. The problem that I asked him and I asked Leader Candelora and everybody else is, we agree on a lot of the topics. We don't agree on how you're going to get there, meaning how you're going to fund it, right? And even the rebate, that is the classic election year move to pander to people, right? Throw a couple $100, they'll be, oh, he gave me money back, so I'll vote for him.
There was another area of agreement, and that's education. Both Republicans and Democrats and the governor want to see ECS money, that's the money that goes to cities and towns, increased. I think everyone agrees with that, because if education is properly funded, then you don't have to raise property taxes. So I'm always trying to find those areas where they find some agreement, but clearly the ICE issue was a big one.
And
he spoke to Minority Leader Candelora. In one sentence, he said it wasn't big enough. So it's funny that it might not be big enough for some, but there's still this talk of the guardrails. I mean, when you're talking to rank and file Republicans and Democrats up in the state legislature, what is their sense of the guardrails?
Well, the governor's budget is balanced, and it does comply with the guardrails. And some of the money that Connecticut has benefited by paying down pension debt, right? We're saving billions in interest over the decade. But the point is that how much of that money do you use? And where do you use it? Connecticut has a $4+ billion surplus. That's great. But that's not going to be enough, and it certainly shouldn't be used for everything that everybody wants.
Right, and the problem with paying for programs with surplus money is their one-time revenues, right? So next year you come back and it's like, well, where did my money go? I have no funding for this program, and that's the problem. It's not a bottomless pit.
It's the bonus. Susan Raff is our chief political reporter. I know that she's super busy because you're going to be bringing us live reports on Eyewitness News at 4, 5, and 6. We will also be here. Not only are we streaming from 1 to 3 on WFSB+, we'll be bringing you live coverage of the day's events at 4, 5, and 6. But I know you've got a lot to do, so I want to be cognizant of your time that you have to go.
I'm going to mention one more area of compromise that everyone also agreed on, and that is the banning of social media, cell phones. Connecticut has made progress, if you will. Governor talked about it in his speech last time about having younger kids not have access to cell phones. Now he calls it bell to bell. K through 12 doesn't want any cell phones in school. I asked the chair of the Education Committee if that's going to be a tough sell for a lot of schools, maybe for some of the older kids, maybe for their parents. But it's something, I think it's a bitter pill to swallow, but once it's swallowed, people like it.
Yes, kids have even said that they like it better as long as everyone has no access, much less drama and more learning. Susan Raff, thank you. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. We'll see you later. Thank you.
Have fun reporting. She'll be having live coverage for us coming up. And you're watching WFSB Capitol Rundown, our exclusive streaming show where we bring you politics that matter to you from both sides of the aisle. If you're just joining us, we've got Themis Klarides. She's former House leader with the Republicans. And we have Jimmy Tickey. He's a Democratic strategist out with a brand new book, which is all about organizing to win and saving democracy for everybody getting involved. And right now I want to bring in Stephen Harding. He is the Senate Minority Leader. Yes, we're on flexible chairs here, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Before session started.
No, I think it's so important that we hear from as many voices as possible. This is why this is our first time doing this, and we appreciate you taking time. A lot of this has been about the things we want to do, but what can we pay for, given that the fact the federal government is taking money away from Connecticut in many areas. So how sustainable is this without federal money and is still advancing the priorities that the governor wants?
So there's no doubt that the federal government has an impact, right? And obviously there's revenue that's been lost that's going to impact our budgeting and make it a little more difficult. But I would argue and contend that our biggest problems are here within our own state government. If you look on our Medicaid line, a lot of the Medicaid cuts that we may see have little to nothing to do about our federal government.
Right.
It's overruns within ourselves. We're not controlling that. We're not auditing it properly. And we're going over by millions and millions of dollars every single year and having to offset that in deficit mitigation. So it really, we have a lot of problems with spending within ourselves far outside what the federal government may be doing.
How do you fix that? Can AI help? How can you have all these cost overruns that are just wrong?
I don't think we've had effective auditing, frankly. I think that's what the biggest problem is. There was an audit that had begun on looking into why the Medicaid was being overspent to the capacity it has been, and there's been so many overruns, and from my understanding, that investigation has now stopped and ceased. So at the first, I mean, even outside of AI, Kara, I would say that we should look at reinvestigating that audit, truly finding out what they can find, and then, there are tools, maybe through AI, that we can find other mechanisms by which to find savings and see what is driving up our budgets in Medicaid that we've seen lately.
Jimmy, I'll let you ask the first question since you're from the other side of the aisle.
I am from the other side of the aisle. So, well, thank you. Careful, that's on tape. So I would say, so many people think people just go to their camps, right, to that exact point. Republicans, Democrats, House, Senate. So is there anything that you heard today from the governor that you do think your members could get behind?
Well, I mean, he did address electric costs. He said they were high. And his answer to that was a $200 energy rebate. I would argue and contend that that's not even close to what we need to provide our residents throughout the state to offset our electric bills. I mean, I talk to constituents every day that have electric bills, particularly those that in this time of year that are on electric heat, thousands of dollars a month. And in some cases, it's more than their mortgage, what they have to pay for. We have the third highest electric rates in the country. I appreciate the fact that he wants to address it. We did have bipartisan support for energy legislation last year that took a small piece of the public benefit charge off of our electric bills. But again, to say that that's going to resolve the problem, or to say that we're going to give $200 to you and then you should be happy with that, I think it's a little ridiculous and a little out of touch with the working class people of this state.
Okay.
Well, you got to pick one thing.
Well, I picked the one thing on energy. I mean,
what do you think about the social media proposals and the pot?
See, that's the reason why she's my former leader. She's got the good ideas. But you're right. I mean, that is to your point, Themis, looking back at the times that I stood up and clapped, that was probably one of the areas. Supporting our police is another area. But yeah, I mean, it is becoming an inherent problem in our state, not only our state, our country and our world, with our children, social media, access to the phones, access to AI. It's a scary thing, and I am happy the governor did address it, because I think we need to start tackling that.
In the national news, we see ICE all the time. There's such concern in other communities. They're talking about, we have the famous picture of the 5-year-old who was ripped from his preschool. We've seen protests out here, but in the land of priorities, the governor certainly talked about this is going on.
Yeah.
How much is it a big problem right now, ICE enforcement, from your perspective in Connecticut, and what needs to be done?
So I think one of the bigger problems with ICE enforcement, frankly, here in Connecticut, is the difficulties to have law enforcement involved. We've enacted the Trust Act, which I think was created for a noble cause. But the problem is what Governor Walz and President Trump were talking about doing about the local law enforcement officials in Minnesota handing over the criminal undocumented immigrants to ICE, as opposed to them going through the streets, which I would agree is something we should want to avoid here in this state and throughout the country. Because of the Trust Act, we can't even do that. Our local law enforcement and our troopers are significantly limited in what conversations they can have with ICE. And the governor even alluded to it in his speech, and he's right. Our local law enforcement and troopers are much better trained than ICE, and ultimately they should be the ones that are involved in the process. But ironically, we have a Trust Act right here in the state that the Democrats have supported, the governor has supported. And I understand the noble cause behind it, but it's actually getting in the way of what I think would be an effective way of addressing this, which is having law enforcement more involved in tracking down the criminal undocumented immigrants and working in conjunction with ICE to hand them over, as opposed to ICE seeking out other undocumented immigrants.
Local law enforcement needs to be more involved would be your bottom line.
Yes.
Okay. Themis, Jimmy, anyone else want to ask a question while we still have time?
Do you acknowledge that the cuts that this president, this federal administration have made, you've seen at a state level, you've seen how those cuts do make a difference on the ground?
Yeah, no, I admit it. I mean, it does hinder our budget. There's no doubt about it. And there are certainly programs that I believe in, that many of my caucus members, Republican, but even Republicans and Democrats in a bipartisan fashion, I think, in this building, believe in. So yeah, there's no doubt there's impact. There's certain programs that I would probably look at and say, yeah, that's wasteful, that this president, this administration, this Congress may have cut. But there's also some programs that I would openly say are not wasteful, and we need to see that funding to help these individuals. So, yeah, I'll be the first to acknowledge that.
A reasonable answer.
Steve, what do you think? What do you think about last year? the legislature voted to change the volatility cap so more money could come out of it. The governor said that's going to happen again this year. You know how strongly we feel about the guardrails. How do you guys plan on handling that?
So I mean, you were there, and Themis, you were a huge part, as you know, of implementing these fiscal guardrails. And part of that was the experiences that you had prior to those fiscal guardrails being implemented. And I had one term myself, as you know, living in that deficit world where we were scraping for every single cent to balance that budget and couldn't find it, and unfortunately had to implement back-to-back historical record tax increases to make the budget balance. We cannot go back to the same mistakes, because what led us to that place, as you know, was irresponsible spending when we had money, and the minute the money dried up, looking at ourselves and not knowing what to do. And the guardrails have been the one thing that has stood in the way of that to prevent irresponsible spending by the legislature. We need to keep them in place. We can't make the same mistakes of the past.
And we were saying before, it's not a bottomless pit. That's the problem. Where we were prior to putting all this money in our savings account was in a very bad place. We couldn't find money for anything because people spent and spent and spent. Yeah. And now we have all this money, and it's great if you find there's emergencies, of course. There's certain things you use it for. But you have to be very, very cautious with where it goes. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Stephen Harding. We appreciate it. Senate Minority Leader of Brookfield, we appreciate your time. And next I want to bring in Bob Duff. He's the Senate Majority Leader. So we're going to get a different perspective here. We're passing the mic. We're quite literally passing the baton. I appreciate if you're just joining us. We've got Themis for the Republicans, Themis Klarides, and we've got Jimmy Tickey for the Democrats as a Democratic strategist, bringing you live streaming coverage from the Capitol on this first day of the session. Thank you, sir, for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we just heard the minority perspective. I want to bring in the majority perspective. And
tell it to you straight and right how it is.
Yes, this is why we have Themis Klarides, former House Leader, and Jimmy Tickey here, because they can add something of what's happened in the wee hours of the night in those chambers that I don't know. But, we hear a lot in Connecticut. First of all, I remember those days covering. We just talked about, remember, deficit land. No one wants to go back there. But when we're talking about affordability, which is a buzzword in every campaign across America right now, and we're losing money from the federal government, what's your top priority, and can we fund it?
Well, thank you. And this is why we're all good friends here. We may disagree at times, but we do respect each other. Themis and I spent a lot of time in that windowless room back in 2017 for many, many months together. But yeah, affordability obviously is a big issue. I would also say a democracy agenda is a big issue as well. We have a president, a man who sits in the Oval Office, who's done nothing but raise prices since his first day. He's talked about lowering prices on day one, but in fact it's been the exact opposite. We see prices going up and up. People are having a harder and harder time making ends meet across this nation, and of course in Connecticut too. So we're seeing energy prices go up because of his tariffs. We're seeing grocery prices go up because of his tariffs. Everything's going up because of his tariffs and his bad economic policies. So here in our state capital, we're going to do what we can in our small corner of the world, and we're going to try and bring down prices. We're going to try and make it a little bit better for the people of the state of Connecticut and give them a little breathing room.
I want to ask you before we're going to have both sides of the aisle here ask you some questions. But one of the big issues for our viewers, as we've reported the horrific cases of the captivity case in Waterbury and also Jacqueline Torres Garcia, who was found dead, allegedly murdered by her mother. Both of those children were put into homeschooling before the horrible crimes were revealed. What is your take? The homeschooling lobby's big. A lot of people, we have the most liberal rules, if basically no rules here in Connecticut. Yet these cases to the average person are raising concern. Do you see homeschooling, some regulation coming up?
Well, interesting you say that, because when I first got in the state Senate, there was a bill about homeschooling, something I'd never even thought about or knew about or contemplated. I was shocked and overwhelmed at the amount of people who actually cared about this issue and spoke up about it. So that was kind of my first foray into, there's a massive group of people who I never even knew about existed, and they came to the state capitol and they shut down that bill pretty quickly. Representative Art O'Neill, I think, was one of the main folks who kind of was somebody who disagreed with regulations on homeschooling. I think we need to do something. We've got to have strong rules on homeschooling because of the fact of what we've seen across our state and the fact that I think at the minimum, we should just kind of get in line with many other states. Republican states, Democratic states, we should probably have better parameters on homeschooling. We just want to keep kids safe. We want to make sure they're getting a good education. People want to educate their kids at home. Okay, that's their choice. But let's make sure that they're learning, that we know who they are, and that they're being safe, and that we don't have these kinds of things that we saw coming out of parts of our state.
So I'll put you on the spot. Do you think legislation will actually get voted on?
I hope so. I do hope so. I mean, because I think there are a number of us who see the problem and see the issue. What that's going to look like, I couldn't predict right now.
Okay. Themis?
So let's go back to the governor's. Hi, Bob. Let's go back to the governor's speech. Well, I see your talking points haven't changed. We went right into blaming Trump for everything that's going wrong in this state. Okay, whatever. But the governor has a lot of proposals in his State of the State, and I know Republicans and Democrats have a lot of proposals, but as I've said to many Democrats here, we all agree on most things. It's just how we get there, right? How do we pay for it? So all of these proposals that are in there, they all are great in theory, but how are you going to pay for them? You're going to change the volatility cap again and start taking more money out of our savings?
Well, I think there's a lot of needs here in the state of Connecticut, and we have to figure out how to pay for those needs and how to address those needs that we have. And as you know, as a leader and as somebody who is here, there's the governor's proposal in the beginning. We all have our different ideas. We have Senate Bill 1, obviously, that has a number of different proposals in there as well. And that's part of the whole negotiation process. We're never going to be able to do everything, obviously, but we're going to work on making things more affordable here in the state of Connecticut. I wish I didn't have to blame Trump for everything, but it is his fault. And a lot of it is his fault. And the fact of the matter is that he has made things worse in our state, and he's made things worse in our country. So we're going to have to try and figure out how to deal with that the best that we can. I'm glad that we set up the $500 million fund that's literally put food on people's tables, that has kept their lights on and has helped them in a number of different ways. I wish we didn't have to do that. We've had to figure out how to do that. We're going to have to figure out how to do some other things as well, but that's all the important things of this legislative session.
That funding has helped people when we've seen the cuts from the federal government. I just have a question outside of the budget, but really some of the issues that you've been very involved in have been all about AI, privacy, data protection. Just tell us a little bit about maybe what you're working on for the legislative session ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And, again, these are issues that I really, truly wish our Congress, both parties, would figure out and work on in Washington, D.C. These should not be partisan issues. These should not be things that our federal government couldn't get over the finish line. It really is their wheelhouse to do these things. But
we agree on that.
See that? Yeah. In the absence of that,
we always are good for agreement. We love agreement.
In the absence of that, states are really taking the lead on AI, taking the lead more on privacy. I'm very proud of the fact that Connecticut has some of the strongest data privacy laws in the country. We're going to continue to build on that. Facial recognition, biometrics,
we
things
also
like
have some of the strongest identity theft numbers, right?
Yeah, right. And we're going to be working on AI. I think that it's a mistake of the administration here in Connecticut not to embrace AI rules and laws and parameters. I've had those conversations. I've said it publicly many times, so there you go.
Okay.
So we're going to continue to work on those things, but we play a game of whack-a-mole in a sense, that like almost with healthcare. You think you solve a couple problems, and then next thing you know, you've got another couple issues to deal with when you didn't think you had to deal with them. Data brokerage is a big thing. There's a lot of money in companies that are sweeping people's data off the internet.
Ransomware, we just had a huge case in New Britain. For the last few days we've been covering it.
Exactly. So those are the things that we're trying to get through. We tried to get that through last year. We couldn't get it through. We're going to push it again this year. So.
Okay. We appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us.
Senate Majority Leader. I do enjoy working with my colleague, Steve Harding. He's a good guy.
Yeah. I love that we had the Minority Leader and the Majority Leader back to back.
All right.
Because here on the Capitol Rundown, we do want to bring you issues from both sides of the aisle that matter to you. We're live here if you're just joining our stream on WFSB Plus or the WAX. You may be excused, sir. Thank you.
Very much.
I will say, so
I'm going to stay for the
reason
second
he
segment.
likes working with Steve Harding is because they were both House members first.
Yeah.
And that's
the
the premier chamber.
And now we want to bring in Senate President Pro Tem Martin Looney. We appreciate you being here, sir. As we're bringing in, we're come up on the 2 o'clock hour. We'll be staying here until 3 o'clock. And we're bringing you the politics that matter to you, all the issues that are going to be the priorities until May 6th with this this new shorter session, I should say. So as we speak on, we've been asking about, the governor laid out a lot of cause for unity, but also some priorities and the concern about can we afford to pay for them. What did you think of the state and with where we can go from here that the average person needs to understand?
Well, I was certainly pleased and encouraged by the governor's message. I like the idea of his committing to create a fund of $500 million. Clearly, his approach to that would be to do a rebate related to energy. We might have some other ideas on that, but what our caucus is focusing on is the figure of the $500 million, and then we'll negotiate the rest of it thereafter. But I think that was an encouraging note. Clearly, the idea of setting up an education commission to review ECS is a good idea. There are so many complexities to that. But we would also like to go a little bit further than that and amend the foundation grant by at least a small incremental amount next year to move toward an adjustment that would reflect the loss to inflation since it was established at 11,500 back about 12 or 13 years ago. But certainly there are so many complexities to that formula, especially what weight do you give to poverty, what weight do you give to special ed, what weight do you give to English as a second language. All those complex factors, I think, rightly will be within the purview of the commission he wants to set up.
Thank you. Themis, I'm going to let you ask a first question. And also, if we could, if you wouldn't mind, it's so loud here, if you wouldn't mind speaking up a little bit so us over here can hear as well, too.
Okay. Yeah.
Senator.
Hi, Themis.
How are you?
Well, thanks.
Good, good. A lot of good ideas in the governor's speech. How do we pay for them?
Well, I think we can pay for it. We have a big surplus. We have a rainy day fund. I'm always willing to go a little bit higher on the progressive taxation at the upper end, if we could persuade him to do that. I think we have the fact that our maximum rate on the income tax at 6.99% means that people who make $1 million a year are taxed at the same rate as people who make 10, 20, or $50 million a year. That's something I think that we could address. If we did that, we could easily pay for much more property tax relief and other things. Obviously, we haven't been able to get a consensus with the governor on that issue, but I think there are many things in his speech that we can close ranks with him on and be supportive.
Well, I don't know if people like their taxes raised, but stay tuned for that, right? How do you feel about the guardrails, the fiscal guardrails we have in place? I know you and your party have been trying to, I'll say a word my father would use, finagle with them to try and get more money out of them. And you were here, as I was, in the years where we struggled and struggled during deficits. And now we are flush because of those guardrails. We want to make sure we keep them in place, don't we?
I think we do, but we have to be flexible enough to make some adjustments. Clearly, the world is not what it was in 2017 when we first passed them. I think we have to reflect the growing need in a number of areas in terms of education, social services, healthcare. We have to continue to be concerned about the thunderbolts and hand grenades thrown at us in Washington where federal aid might be cut. Sometimes we don't even know with much advance notice when it's going to happen and what it will be persisted in as opposed to what will be scaled back. So we had, for instance, the governor the president sent out a letter at 2 o'clock in the morning one day substantially cutting mental health funding, changed his mind about it the next day. So, but we have to be ready for that. And so the world is very different than it was. Clearly, the principle of a cap and some restraint on spending has to be maintained, but we do have to find some flexibility to meet needs that were not as acute in 2017 as they are now.
Senator, I don't think there is anyone that knows this building as well as you do and the legislative process, and you have helped usher through so many pieces of legislation and have helped so many people. So we're on TV and we're streaming right now. If people are watching this and they're just curious about how government works, what advice would you give to a young person who maybe wants to get involved in this space, or they see us up here at the Capitol? How do you do it?
Well, I think you should begin by volunteering at the local level. Get involved with your party, your town committee, your town. Get to know your state legislator as well, and then just get a sense of how we operate incrementally. I remember one time there was a person who wanted to run for state representative, came to see me, and she said, I want to revolutionize the place. And I said, well, you probably shouldn't be running for legislative office because you're going to be frustrated. Maybe you should run for executive office if you want to have a big impact in a short period of time. But if that's not what you want, you'll find that those who come into the legislature as new members and who think that they are going to transform the place by getting all of the senior members to defer to them just because their ideas are so wonderful, that doesn't happen.
Senator, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Senator. We will see what happens in the session with these priorities and the big themes here as we discuss affordability. And as Themis keeps asking, how do you pay for some of these initiatives? But we appreciate you helping everybody understand what's at stake until May 6th. We appreciate it.
Good. Okay. The short session goes by very quickly. And what people often don't realize is that in the short session, individual legislators can only introduce budget-related bills that relate to spending or taxation. Bills on other policy subjects have to be raised by committees and not introduced by individual legislators. So there's a greater power in the committee chairs to select what they want to take up in an even-year session, and because they're more of the gatekeepers.
Thank you, Senate.
Yep, good.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
We are live here streaming on WFSB Plus, live from the Capitol on the first day of the session. It is a short session, and that means there's less time to accomplish a lot of priorities. It's also an election year. So our next guest is State Representative Josh Elliott, but he's also a Democratic candidate for governor running against Governor Ned Lamont, who just gave his State of the State address. Thank you for being with us.
A pleasure.
Yeah, so as someone who is running against the governor, what was the biggest issue that you have a problem with his priorities?
So he's getting the issue right, which is affordability, and the part that I find offensive, the $200 rebate. And you think that I would love that, but here's the problem. It solves nothing structural. It is a one-time gift from the middle class back to the middle class during an election year. And then for the next 4 years, it's going to be stagnation again. He's had 8 years to deal with utility companies. He let his top regulator get run out by Eversource. And my belief is that there's significantly more that we need to do for the long run to rein back in these utility companies and actually provide long-lasting year-over-year relief.
So let me ask you, because the governor is enjoying high popularity numbers in polls. Many people here have talked about his ability to reach across the aisle and be partisan. He's an incumbent. All of that presents an uphill battle for someone like yourself. Why did you decide to take Governor Lamont on? What is your biggest idea with why something has to change?
Sure. He is going to be running for a third term. We don't really have three-term governors. He is a near billionaire. And my feeling is that we are living at a point in time where we have the most significant wealth and income disparities than we've ever had. And we in Connecticut are the poster child for that. And my belief is that when you have a system where the people who make the least are paying more as a percentage than those who make the most by a differential of 2.5 to 1, that we are at a point where people are struggling significantly, and they don't know exactly why. And some of this, my belief, is that we are not asking the wealthy to pay enough to offset the property taxes on the local level. So the governor will crow about the fact that he's giving middle-class tax relief. That will be a sliver of the actual need, while people's property taxes have been absolutely skyrocketing. And so this is something that CCM has been talking about, that municipal-level leaders are aware of, but as long as we don't keep sending the money back to offset the cost of education, the offset fire and police and our transportation system, it's going to be continuing to rely on the people that are struggling the most to basically make sure that government works. And that to me is deeply unfair.
All right, Themis, I'm going to let you take the first question.
We actually agreed on one thing. This might be the first time. I don't agree with the rebate either. Because for the reasons, right? It's not a structural change. It's just a one time. So, but let's get to the other stuff. People who make more money already pay more taxes.
That's right.
Okay? And you don't think that the bigger part of the problem in this state is not taxing people more, because we're one of the highest tax states in the country. Mm-hmm. It's how we spend our money, and it's about getting rid of waste, which we never do.
Yeah. Where's the waste? What's the waste?
I mean, you could go through the budget, I'm sure you have, like I have, and find line by line by line of multiple things and duplicate things and programs that people aren't even using because they don't find them necessary.
I mean, is LIHEAP waste? Is SNAP waste? I mean, what part of the budget is it paying people too much? I mean, over the past 20 years, we have seen the way that the wages in state government have continued to decline much quicker than average household income. We have 15% less people that are employed by the state, so we're shrinking the workforce in a way that actually means that we have more overtime than we've ever had before. I think when people talk about waste, they talk about maybe social safety net programs, but we see the ways that that's been gutted by the federal government. You know, it's easy to say that there's waste, but unless you're actually targeting specifically what you mean by waste, to me it's sort of just, it's a word like affordability. What does affordability mean? It can mean something different to everybody. And so my perspective is that we, because of the spending cap, have actually been increasing our spending by less than what the dollar has been increasing by. And what I mean by that is we increase it by average household income or CPI, but we haven't been doing it by energy or food for decades. So we're artificially shrinking government right there. But even more than that, we haven't been increasing it by capital gains. And out of all the things that we're seeing, whether it's the cost of living or average household income, we know capital gains have been exploding. And if the state government doesn't increase at a size that is requisite to that, commensurate to that, we're actually making government smaller over time. So I would push back on that to say that it feels big, it feels momentous because the middle class has to pay for so much more. But again, if the top 4,500 income earners pay no more than 8% of their income to state and local taxes, while the bottom 1.2 million, a third of our state, pays at minimum 20%, that to me is the inherent problem with our system, and hiring a billionaire for a third term, that's not going to fix it.
So, Representative, let me ask, you're running for governor as a Democrat against our current governor. Correct. So if we had a magic wand and we fast forward to you being in office and you were giving the state of the state, we don't have time for a full speech now, but what would be your 3 top priorities if you were governor and you were giving a state of the state?
You know, it's interesting because we're going to talk about some of the same things, but the way we're going to address them is different. You know, the governor did poll testing for about 4 or 5 months to understand that housing, energy, and affordability are issues for people. As somebody who knocks doors every cycle and has plenty of conversations with people in the middle class, I already know these things. Now, the way we're going to address these is significantly different. When you're talking about affordability, Connecticut is the second most reliant state in the country on the property tax. This is a tax that is essentially acting as a wealth tax on the middle class, because if you are a lower income earner or a middle class earner and you're lucky enough to own your own home, you're getting taxed essentially on all of your wealth because it's stored in equity in your home. When you're ultra wealthy, it is very rare that a majority or even a bare plurality of your wealth is going to be in your home. It's going to be in bonds and equities in the stock market. So we rely on essentially a wealth tax on the middle class. So the first thing is massive tax overhaul. Interestingly, Ben Candelora, the representative minority leader now, is also talking about property tax reform because there's a recognition that this is the most problematic tax. So that's what I would focus on first. You have higher upper marginal tax brackets, both for income and capital gains, send way more money back to our municipalities to offset for the property tax. Then you're talking about energy. Well, we saw after Marissa Gillette got pushed out by Eversource, what happened? Well, within that week, Eversource and UI, they asked for a rate change. They got, instead of 9%, they got 9.25%. They've been looking for this rate change for the last couple of years. They finally get it when they have this full PR press to push the top regulator out. My feeling is our utilities must be reined in. They should not be taking as much as they want whenever they want. We have some of the highest energy costs in the U.S. And the last bit is this. With housing, you're going to have to provide more subsidies, because if the builders can't build and they don't make the numbers work, it doesn't matter what you do regulatorily. And then you need to work on minimum lot sizes so that people can't have just acres and acres of sprawl, and you need to work on more density. Yes, some of the things the governor was talking about were good, but it is not even close to far enough.
Representative Josh Elliott, thank you so much. In the interest of time, I probably can't let you go through all your top priorities, but very interesting for people to learn the different ideas, even though many of you are talking about the same outcomes. As you keep saying, Themis, how do you get there? How do you pay for it? So we're sharing voices from both sides of the aisle. Thank you, Representative Elliott.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also running for governor, Josh Elliott. And right now, next, I want to bring in Jen Tooker, and she's a Republican for state comptroller. And we are here talking about all of the issues that the governor just presented in the State of the State address, as we are experiencing a short session. We have until May 6th. We keep hearing about $313 million and a lot of questions about how we're going to spend it and what are we going to do if it all dries up. So thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
After listening to the governor's speech and coming as a Republican, which fiscal guardrails, as Themis keeps saying, very important, what's your top priority and can we afford it?
So my top priority as comptroller is to make sure that we are not just celebrating short-term wins, which is what I would say this administration likes to celebrate, but ensure that we are fiscally secure for the long term and making sure our long-term obligations are properly funded.
And if there's a magic wand, to use Jimmy's phrasing, is there something you would change immediately to assure that?
I'd make sure our reporting on our long-term, long-tail obligations is very pensions and healthcare is very transparent, very understandable, and absolutely accurate.
Themis.
So you've decided to run for state comptroller. Congratulations, and you're running against an incumbent, Comptroller Scanlon. What do you think is something he's done since he's been in office that you disagree with the most, or you would have handled differently?
So I do know that the current state comptroller is very interested in opening up the state medical plan for nonprofits and for small businesses. And what I will say to you is, as somebody who comes from the reinsurance business, almost 25 years in the reinsurance business, before I started to serve my community of Westport and an elected official, making sure the small print on promises like that really is important, that they are, that we can actually stay true to those promises, and that, again, from a long-term, long-tail standpoint, we absolutely have control of those costs. So I'm not sure that that's the case at the moment, and I would make sure we take a deep dive into that.
And Jimmy, what would your question be? Having, if you earlier today, we did get to speak to Comptroller Scanlon about his
Right. Oh, thank you.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
Jimmy wrote a book about organizing to win for anybody who might want to run for office, regardless of party.
Yes. The book is bipartisan, right?
Absolutely.
Me,
Thank you.
not always, but no. Seriously, thank you for running and putting yourself out there.
Thanks, Jimmy.
We did hear from the comptroller earlier. Now, what's interesting about Connecticut is that we don't have a comptroller that's all in one, like many states do. We actually have a treasurer who deals with our pensions and our investments. The comptroller is really focused on health care. So when we're at a time where people are seeing their health care costs double and triple, what are your plans for healthcare and for our health systems in Connecticut?
Right, and so again, I will say that I'm suspect of driving people to the state plan. As a municipal leader, I did not put our municipality into that state plan, and so what I want to make sure is that there's adequate competition for on healthcare and medical insurance, and make sure that if we start to push people to a state plan, that we understand the fine details.
Thank you.
As we're entering this election year, I'll echo what Jimmy said. I think it's great when other voices are coming in. And I love to be able to share them with our viewers. So we want to thank you for sharing your time with us. It's always good when you have people coming at both sides of the aisle because you get more ideas. Correct? All right. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And next, speaking of candidates, I would like to bring in Senator Ryan Fazio. He's Senator Ryan Fazio. You've probably seen him on the news. He's a Republican running for governor, also in office, but one of the many who have jumped in the ring for the Republican side. Senator, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We just had you on the news this week talking about the need to really transform energy costs and our electric bills and whatnot. We've been asking people, and I'll ask you too, the theme here is affordability, yet we want to have some good things that are going to improve society. What would be your top priority, and can you pay for it?
Thank you for having me, and that's, I think, the most important question on everyone's minds. The state of the state is unaffordable, and policies in the state capitol have contributed to that. So my top priority as governor would be to eliminate the public benefits charge and cut electric rates by about 20%. Second, it would be to deliver the biggest middle-class income tax cut in state history, about $1,500 for the average family making around $100,000 a year. Third is to cap property taxes, which have spiraled out of control and pushed many middle-class, working-class families out of their homes. And fourth would be to cut healthcare costs, which have spiraled out of control as well. Introduce more competition into the healthcare and health insurance industry to benefit consumers and patients.
So that's a lot of things, and I guess I would want to say how. I know people have talked about cutting the income tax, so and I know Jimmy and Themis will jump in on this, but in order to give money back Where does the money come from in your idea?
That's a great question, and anyone who's running for office should be asked how they're going to deliver the promises that they make. So I think I'm of the belief that we should be, as leaders, ambitious and realistic. So here's how I would deliver the largest middle-class income tax cut in state history. First, slow the growth of the spending in the budget. So we just passed a budget that grows spending by 6% year over year, which I think is unreasonable. If you just grow it at the rate of inflation, that will give you hundreds of millions of dollars to cut taxes on middle-class families. Second is to take away some of the special interest carve-outs and deductions in the tax code that benefit politically connected companies, but at the expense of middle-class families. And then finally, we have to reduce the debt-issued spending that we're making every single year. Those three measures would allow us to deliver over $1 billion of middle-class income tax relief.
Themis, you know the numbers better because you used to look at the budgets. What do you think?
Bleary-eyed looking at the numbers, right? Ryan, so you got in the race a little bit later. What did you see as the difference between other people in the race and what you have to offer and why you would be the better candidate?
Listen, I'm running from the heart. I love this state. I was born here and raised here. This state is my home. And I believe that with positive change to our state policy and our state leadership, that the state can succeed like never before. I've been the leading voice in the state for cutting electric rates. As senator, I passed the law that forces the public benefits charge to be disclosed by utilities every single month. We were paying that for many, many decades as residents.
How much do we all pay for that?
About $1 billion. So
like on my bill, where do I find it?
You find that in the top right of your bill. It says public benefits charge, energy programs passed by the state government.
Okay.
And so that's a hidden tax. I've been the leading voice in the state legislature for eliminating it. And as governor, I'll do just that. I think I understand the issues. I've won tough races in a blue district, bringing people together and focusing on the things that matter the most. So I'm confident I could win this race and I can govern effectively.
The public benefits charge, you have been the leader in kind of separating it out. The actual public benefits charge was a bipartisan vote, where at the time even Republicans and Democrats both went in on that. So that was a bipartisan effort to give voters those bills. So how do you pull back from that? What's your plan to change that legislation? And then also when you talk about energy, there's lots of ways of having energy, right? Is it solar, wind? We've seen the president really cut a lot of wind projects, and those things take time to ramp up. So what is the plan if you're actually going to bend costs down for families? It takes time to get those energy systems going.
Great question, Jimmy, and totally reasonable. And I would first of all say the legislation that was passed was bipartisan, but the element of highlighting the public benefits charge was something that I had to push for with other Republicans that ended up in the final legislation. So I was proud to help make that happen. It's necessary because the public has the right to know. Second, the public benefits charges, the programs embedded in the charge, should either be ended immediately, sunsetted, and some of them should be funded through the normal budget process. I think there are some energy efficiency programs that are worthwhile and can be funded through the budget. But there are also programs like redistributive social programs that belong in the normal budget process that could be ended in the public benefits charge immediately. And there's others that are subsidies for private energy generating companies that could be ended over time. These are discretionary programs that were created and passed by governors and legislatures over many years, so they can also be ended by a governor and legislators in the years to come.
All right. Senator Ryan Fazio, thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for sharing. And as we continue to hear a free exchange of ideas here on the Capitol Rundown, we are coming up on 2:30, and I am excited to bring in Republican Betsy McCoy. She is also running for governor. If you've been around any length of time, you might have seen her, former lieutenant governor of New York. She's also been a conservative host on Newsmax. And thank you. Welcome to the program. We appreciate you being here.
Big day in Hartford.
Yeah, big day. And I know that you're here because you also kind of jumped into the race later than some with a message, sometimes pretty aggressive, calling him Rich Boy Lamont for our current governor. And
Moneybags is his name. Moneybags.
And we want to know, if you were to win, you're talking a lot about affordability, but what does that look like in a McCoy administration? What happens off the bat?
Believe me, it is not a $200 puny check from the state of Connecticut. It's a good job with a growing paycheck. That is the best affordability plan. And I've made it clear that I will eliminate the state income tax because right now Connecticut ranks 48th out of 50 in economic growth. It's a shame, and it's because Moneybags is not competing with the other governors for growth, for bringing companies back into the state. We need to eliminate the income tax to remain competitive with the other states in America. 8 states are currently eliminating their income tax. 9 already don't have an income tax. So when you say it can't be done in Connecticut, high taxes, that's not an act of nature. Of course it can be done.
Okay, but I think, and you guys can correct me because you've looked at the budgets more than I have, $6 billion comes from the income tax?
Actually, 12.5 billion. 12.5 out of 24 billion comes from the income tax. But when you tax something less, you get more of it. And every state that has phased out the income tax has found that when they first announce that they're going to phase out the income tax, many, many companies move into the state, providing tremendous business activity and other types of revenue. And as the economy booms, the state does better and better. When you want more of something, you tax it less.
Okay, Themis.
Well, I certainly agree with that, and welcome to the race, and welcome here. The problem is, as somebody who was a legislator for many years, and somebody who agrees that the income tax should go away, but that's a lot of $1 billion. Okay, and I agree with the result. I agree with what the result is in having a state that doesn't have an income tax. We can look at Florida. But how do we get there?
Oh,
right.
well,
that's a lot of money to make up all at once.
That's right, but as I just pointed out, 8 other states are in the process of doing it. South Carolina passed theirs last week, by the way. How did these states do it? As revenue increases 5%, they notch the income tax rate down again and again. It's a gradual process. It might take 5 years, depending on the state of the economy. But in the meantime, those states are thriving more and more, while Connecticut is declining. We lost another 5,200 jobs last year. We can't afford it. It's already 48th out of 50 states. Lamont is competing with spineless Kathy Hochul next door for running the worst state in America, and he's gaining on her.
But there would have to be cuts also. There would have to be cuts to the budget also to even to make up a lot of that money. Where would you look to cut?
Take a look at these other states. Take a look at them, 8 of them. Nobody's saying, oh my gosh, there's a terrible cut in services in this state. Instead, they're saying, look at the businesses coming in. I need less from the state because I've got a bigger paycheck.
Okay.
And I think most people in Connecticut would rather have a big paycheck than a $200 handout from Moneybags Lamont.
Jimmy, I'll let you take the next question.
Okay. Because that's a lot of money. Nice to meet you. $12 billion is a lot of money out of the state budget. But let me ask, for people that are watching that just love politics, you mentioned the state of New York. You were the lieutenant governor in the state of New York, ran for governor and lieutenant governor in New York. So why run for governor in Connecticut and pretty late in the race, right? We had candidates.
My heart is. I grew up in Connecticut, in Milford, and then in Westport. My dad worked at the W.E. Bassett nail clipper factory in Derby. He was a factory worker, a maintenance man. And all my opportunities in life started right here. The day I won a scholarship to college and my dad put that Vassar decal on the back of his old blue Dodge Dart, drove me to college, was the biggest day of his life. So this is give back time for me. I live in Connecticut. I've lived here for almost 15 years now. My daughter lives next door with her 2 little babies and her husband. Do you think I want them moving to Tennessee or Florida or South Carolina or Texas where the jobs are? No, I want them right next door to me. So I have to make sure this state is an opportunity state again instead of an evacuation state. People are leaving.
And I know I'm on the other side of the aisle, but I would imagine that the president could sway the entire Republican electorate in Connecticut. So what's your message to President Trump to get involved in this race?
Well, my message is always the same. The president is doing everything he can to be what's best for America. I'm going to do everything I can that's best for Connecticut. And I stand on my own 2 feet.
Do you expect an endorsement from President Trump?
I haven't looked for it. Of course, I would welcome it. But the fact is, I'm running this race standing on my principles and my knowledge and my fighting spirit, and we'll see what happens.
So we heard a lot in the governor's State of the State. You're a mother, and education was clearly important. I read up about you, obviously a very accomplished, very intelligent woman, scholarships given to some of the best schools in America. I think everyone agrees they want that for all of their kids. As someone who's putting their kids through college right now, it's quite expensive. So when you talk about cuts of that much, what about the governor's priorities of making it more equal to have free preschool?
Well, I've always supported preschool, but let me point out that Governor Lamont has failed the kids who need help the most. I look at the list of the 10 worst schools in Connecticut. It's the same 10 schools every year. He should have closed those schools years ago. When a school is on the failing list 3 years in a row, it should be closed down. You could fill it again with new teachers and a new principal and start over. But you should not condemn kids to be in a failing school year after year. I said the same thing to Kathy Hochul. No child should be stuck in a failure factory.
You have open choice, so kids in Hartford can do open choice to go to other places. That's part of Sheff versus O'Neill. But let me just ask you so I really understand. Are you in support of any of that, of universal pre-K or any kind of...
I sponsored the universal pre-K program in New York State.
So you do support something like that?
Universal pre-K. I do not support taxpayers in this state providing child care from infancy, toddlerhood, up to pre-K. No. But I do support pre-K because we know it pays for itself. Children learn English much faster. They succeed in school much better. Pre-kindergarten is a very cost-effective, very important program, and I support it wherever I am.
You say that you will bring more businesses. Have you had any discussion? Can you name a business you think would come in the first 6 months of an administration by McCoy?
Dozens of New York businesses, I'm not going to embarrass them in front of Governor Hochul, that will come across the state line as I lower taxes. Dozens, hundreds actually, because they're surviving now, struggling in tax hell. And when I announce that there will be no income tax in Connecticut, you will see the moving vans coming across that state line. There will be a traffic tie-up on 95, on the Parkway, everywhere, as companies and employees move into this state and bring their wealth with them.
What about ICE? People are very upset that are protesting here in Connecticut about the way this is happening in Minneapolis and other places. Do you agree with President Trump about the aggressive measures, or do you differ?
I don't even call it ICE. I call it NICE, National Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I believe in enforcing our immigration laws, keeping the border closed, and respecting people who come into the country legally.
So would you be on some of the sides of the Democrats and others here in Connecticut who don't want that aggressive enforcement in Connecticut?
I disagree with them. I disagree with them. I want the immigration laws enforced. Taxpayers in this state are sick of supporting illegal immigrants who come in here and want their food taken care of, their housing taken care of, everything. It's much too much of a burden. It's a budget buster.
So as far as the tactics, though, are you okay with the tactics that we're currently seeing on the news?
I support enforcement of the immigration laws, period.
All right, we are very honored to have you here, and I love the open format that here on streaming. Before we let you go, anything else that you guys are burning to ask as a candidate?
I want to say one more
McCoy.
thing.
Yes, please.
I'm really running to champion homeowners. And the reason I was drafted into this race, really.
Who drafted you?
Right. Oh, take a look at the Twitter feeds. You will see Run Betsy Run. I started speaking out against this terrible housing law last June. And then when it was passed in an emergency session, I became even more vocal about it. And that's when I got drafted, because Hartford is waging a war on homeowners. I will make that law dead on the day I become governor. It will be dead on arrival. And let me say this, I'm also going to cap property taxes, property tax hikes at 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is lower. And for seniors who own their own home and earn less than $100,000 a year, property taxes will be in the rear view mirror. They will not pay them any more.
Okay.
I know. Just quickly. I know that Kara had asked you about President Trump and an endorsement. Do you think that to win a primary for Connecticut, the Republican nomination for governor in Connecticut, you need a Trump endorsement?
No, I think that the voters of Connecticut will make intelligent decisions and pick a battle-tested, proven fighter to go up and against Ned Lamont. In 1994, everyone said Mario Cuomo seeking a third term was unbeatable. Unbeatable. And George Pataki and I went across that state and talked about lowering taxes and bringing prosperity back to New York. And we beat Mario Cuomo. We whipped his behind from one end of that state to the other. And I'm going to do it again against Ned Lamont.
Betsy McCoy, Republican candidate for governor. Thank you for being very candid. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And we are streaming here in our final half hour on WFSB Plus. This is the Capitol Rundown, where we bring you politics from both sides of the aisle that matter to you, and up close and personal with the candidates that are running for office. And we have Senator Herringasson. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for coming along. And we've had, as you can see, all different voices. We're just coming out. If you're just joining us, we've had the State of the State address, where Governor Lamont really honed in on affordability, health care, and education. I've been asking if there's one priority that you want to focus on, or that you think is the most important for the average person here in Connecticut, what would that be?
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for having me. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is an affordability crisis, but a crisis around housing. We're seeing this happen all throughout the United States. It's not unique to Connecticut, but certainly in Connecticut, because people want to grow their families here, we need to put more housing stock online. And so the number one principal issue for me is, how do we get more housing, more shovels in the ground? How do we incentivize developers to do more mixed-use development and to bring down the prices so that people all across this state, regardless of where you live, could have a roof over their head to be able to take care of themselves and their families?
So give me one way you do that.
Well, I think one way that you do that is you develop I think we have to work with the zoning laws across the different towns and municipalities, relax those zoning requirements so that we can start building more infrastructure in those areas around housing. And I think that we have to engage in new development projects. I think making our towns and our cities more attractive, where people want to come and where they want to live.
Well, as chairman of the Public Safety Commission Committee, Senator, what will be you and your committee's priority this session, since, clearly you don't have any immediate control over ICE, but those issues are coming up, and any other crime issues we talked to Mayor Lamont about the good work they've done in Hartford and trying to bring that to other cities. What is your priority this year for public safety?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that thanks to the leadership of our local law enforcement, for doing such a Herculean job in the state of Connecticut, that we are one of the safest states in the union, and certainly there's opportunity to do more. We need to focus on recruitment and retention. We know that many of our police departments are hemorrhaging right now from the loss of police officers not coming into the force, of those folks who are going into retirement. We want people to know this is an honorable profession, so we need to incentivize more on that front. We need to make sure that our officers know that their job comes with dignity, but also with respect through pay, and that we're taking seriously what they do every day. So we need to create opportunities for them to be able to, let's say, live in a town that they're serving. How do we give them a tax credit to be able to do that? How do we incentivize them around education, and also maybe educating their families as well? So I think we got to do a lot of creative things. We talked about that in public safety last year. I was happy to hear the governor kind of talk about some of these things in his talk today, and I believe that we're moving the goalpost to be able to do some of those things.
So we are off the defund the police kick now?
Well, we need
back to supporting our law enforcement who keep us safe.
To keep us safe. I think that every community needs police officers. I do understand that there has been a fraught relationship with certain communities and police, but I think community-based policing is very important. We can see in the city of Bridgeport that we're doing a great job at that, bringing the community into conversation with law enforcement into communication with the community, because we're all a part of public safety.
Jimmy, I know you're going to have a question, but I want to bring up New Haven, which has been in the news a lot for crime. There was a young woman who was attending an 18 and up bar on Halloween. She ended up shot. They brought in more police. We're hearing about pepper sprays. There's been a lot of crime in New Haven that when I go down there, people have said that they feel like things are changing and they need help. And then we just had the corruption case with the police chief. What specifically do you want to see happen in cities, specifically in New Haven or cities like it?
Well, certainly, I think that, there are a lot of great people in those cities. I am acquainted with New Haven. That's what brought me to Connecticut in the first place. Is I attended Yale University, and I lived in New Haven, in Newhallville. And so I understand what some of the unique challenges are. That's akin to some of the challenges that many of our inner cities have across the United States, but in Connecticut. And we have to make sure that community members, along with law enforcement, are building that level of trust, and that when there are issues around accountability, holding people accountable.
Thank you for your service as chair of the Public Safety Committee. I actually want to go back to housing because I think housing was such an important issue all last session, right? A bill came out. It was supported by enough to get it passed in the House and the Senate. It was vetoed. It then was tweaked. A new and final bill gets passed. Governor signs it. Why is that legislation important? The rising price of houses, of rents, people are really feeling this. So in raising the supply of housing, we're able to maybe bend down some costs. Why is that important? And is there anything we could see coming out in this session with housing?
Yes, again, I think it's mission critical that we have some projects that we can start right now that's shovel ready, putting those things in the ground, letting people know that we are taking this issue seriously, and we need to bring housing online as fast as possible. I think the more housing that we will have is going to help to drive down the prices and the costs. Right now I'm hearing from constituents that rent increases are astronomical, and that is because of the demand, right? There aren't enough housing stock available.
We just got named the hottest housing market in America, but in your world, that's probably not good for affordability?
Well, that's not good for affordability, especially in high demand areas like Bridgeport, where people are really looking to kind of move into those areas, and folks are being taxed out. We're seeing folks moving in from New York, and certainly we welcome folks to our state, but they're moving people further and further down, to Derby and Sonia, Waterbury, and there's just not enough housing for those folks there either.
Okay. So, Deputy Senate President Herron Gasson, thank you so much. We also know that you've just launched a campaign for another term, so we'll be hearing more from you, and we appreciate you taking your time to be on the Capitol Rundown right now.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to being a voice and a continued voice in the state of Connecticut and the town of Stratford and the city of Bridgeport.
Thank you. You are watching the Capitol Rundown. We're streaming on WFSB Plus, as we have been all day, and we are bringing you the issues that matter to you with perspective from both sides of the aisle, and sometimes family as well, because we have Representative Nicole Klarides Ditria. And yes, if you notice that Klarides matches Themis Klarides, because you guys are, I believe you made history as the first sisters to serve in the legislature together. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I love it.
The
Okay.
first brothers were the speaker's father and uncle.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. With Matt Ritter. Okay.
Tom Ritter and his uncle.
Tom Ritter and his. Okay.
And
No,
his
Tom
father.
Ritter. Okay.
Matt Ritter's
and now Matt Ritter. Okay.
Matt Ritter's father and brother. So we weren't the first siblings, but we were the first sisters.
Okay. And both of you have, I know, a lot of focus, different angles of coming at it, but both of you focused a lot. You have physical fitness as part of your profession. I know as you as well, very into health and wellness. As you're hearing, healthcare is a big priority, and we don't have enough primary healthcare, folks. We have talked about this on Kara's Cures. We have a lot of integrative functional nutritionists, naturopathic physicians who would love to help alleviate this, but Connecticut is one of those states that we have a lot of red tape, so to speak. But as you're thinking about how to improve healthcare in Connecticut, what would be your priority?
Well, Kara, healthcare in Connecticut, you have to think access and affordability, and those are two issues. We need more access. We don't have enough primary care doctors. We don't have enough nurses. The burnout rate with those professions is astronomical, so we're trying to do compacts for all these different professions. We just passed the Nurses Compact last year in Connecticut, and every year we're going to try and do another compact to bring more healthcare workers into the state of Connecticut to help with that issue.
What is a compact?
A compact is when, for example, nurses. I'm a nurse in another state. I sign up once, registration, you're licensed, and then I can practice in all 40 states or however many states are part of that compact.
Thank you. So, I'll put you on the spot a little bit. I know that both of you are very knowledgeable about health, and I appreciate that as in my other role hosting Kara's Cures. There are a lot of naturopathic physicians who say they can help. Currently, that's not covered by Medicaid or Medicare, but there's a lot of focus, whatever your title is, on prevention, and yet we need more help, and we need to maybe change the focus. Wouldn't reducing healthcare costs also be about creating more prevention for chronic disease, and how do we do that?
Yes, it would. Part of the issue is because health care is so expensive in Connecticut, people are foregoing going to their primary care doctor, or they're skipping appointments. And what happens? If you don't do that, then it's a snowball effect. You have more issues, more chronic illness, and the hospitals end up taking up the brunt. We should do more with our healthcare professionals, naturopaths. Themis and I both go to our naturopaths, and they're wonderful. And they can be an access point and help with that shortage in our healthcare system.
Especially for those of us who don't have illness as much,
Yes.
but we need prevention and we need help with that. But Themis, I'll let you ask a question of your sister.
Oh, I have so many questions. So on to naturopaths. I mean, first, we for many years have put in legislation to try and expand their scope. Do you think we should do that? And how does that, how come it's not happening, and what can we do to make it happen?
So typically what happens in public health, the naturopaths, which they have in the past, they want to go through what's called a scope of practice review. So that goes through DPH. DPH will typically take up 1 or 2 a year, and they get professionals that are part of their specialty. And then they just have a little chit-chat as to what they'd like to do. What would you like to expand? We talked about having naturopaths be able to prescribe antibiotics, be able to... Yes, as they do in other states, and even something as simple as giving a B12 shot, which helps with your energy and whatnot. There's a lot of pushback because, as we know, doctors are at the top of the food chain, and that's where a lot of the pushback is coming from. But it would alleviate so much problems underneath if we can give naturopaths that ability.
I think is the biggest issue. You're the ranking member, which means you're the Republican leader on the Public Health Committee. What do you think the biggest issue is? I know we talked about what's going to happen with vaccination scheduling and decoupling from the federal government. What do you think is the biggest issue?
Well, there's so many issues. There's certificate of need. We've talked about that. We talked about private equity in healthcare. That's an issue every year.
Healthcare. We might be seeing this even at our veterinarians. We've done stories on this. That means big hedge funds buying up healthcare places, like maybe a pro-health physicians or things like that. And what happens to all of us when that happens?
So the problem is if you get a big company coming in, you don't know if they're going to have their hands in the everyday activity. So these healthcare facilities need influx of money to buy new scanners or do innovative new things for the community. But we want to make sure that they're just not coming in, making a buck and leaving like what happened with Prospect. We want to make sure that never happens again. So we need to have our hands on it somehow to make sure they're not doing any of the day-to-day activity when they do influx, bring an influx.
All
money.
these hospital mergers that we're talking about, Hartford Healthcare taking over some smaller, is that good or is that bad or is it?
Well, we needed something because what was going to happen, these hospitals are going to close, and that's not going to help with our access to, primary care or any health care. So something needed to be done. I'm staying cautiously optimistic that that was the right thing to do, and we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Jimmy.
In the governor's state of the state, what's one thing that you could get behind in what he outlined today in his priorities for the session?
Dig deep.
Anything?
I got to dig deep, dig deep. Public safety. Coming from, my husband's a retired law enforcement officer, and I think it's important to support our public safety and our teachers. We know our teachers are also the backbone of our society. They're with our kids more than we are every day, and we have to appreciate and give them everything we can.
Yeah, Governor Lamont did say we're asking them teachers to do more every day, and everyone should thank a teacher, and he thinks that they should be better paid. I guess the big question we've been asking is what's the priority and how do you pay for all of these things? But thank you so much. It's fun to watch two sisters work together.
Thank you for
Love
having
to
me.
see women involved in
Naugatuck
politics.
Valley, though, right here. Naugatuck Valley.
crew
yes,
here.
yes.
Yeah, all of you from the Naugatuck Valley,
Naugatuck
right?
Valley, yes.
Yeah.
Who would have thought we'd be at the Capitol?
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Nicole. And as we're closing out our program, we got about our final 4 minutes. And if you're just wondering where do we go from here, we're the Capitol Rundown, and we're always streaming on Fridays at 2 p.m. But you can watch on demand all of the episodes on the Capitol Rundown on WFSB Plus, also WFSB.com. Click on local news. What I love about these conversations is I feel like I'm playing the role of everyone at home with the questions of, okay, that someone just said that, but how do we do it? And we have on the Republican side, Themis Klarides, former House leader, and on the Democrat side, Jimmy Tickey as a Democratic strategist. We've heard a lot today. Certainly affordability, if we had $1 for every time it was mentioned, that would be a dent in paying for all this.
And we would also get 50 different definitions of that if we asked what it meant.
Yeah, so what's, in summation, I'll give you 30 seconds, Themis, of what do you think for the Republicans will be the most important?
The most important for the Republicans will be to stop the state from overtaxing and from spending too much money while prioritizing what government is. It is supporting children and having good education and having safe neighborhoods and things that government should do.
Okay, Jimmy, what will be that's a long agenda for Democrats. There are a lot of things, universal pre-care, free breakfast, free lunch for kids, lowering prescription drug costs, affordable housing. That's a lot of things, even if we do have a $313 million surplus.
That's right. It was aspirational. It sets the bar very high about what this legislature can do over the coming weeks and months, and let's get as much done as we can for working families. I think the governor put out a very large agenda. We now have spoken to every leader, House, Senate, Republican, and Democrat, and I think you saw some agreement in some of the big picture things. How do we get there? And then ultimately you see where are the votes, what can come out of committees, and where is the support. I think that there is agreement on wanting to address affordability, but as was mentioned, what does that exactly mean? I think we are in an election year, and you have to actually see what are the policies. So I think the governor putting out his rebate is something that families could see, money in their pocket. And we also heard from some of the gubernatorial candidates, and I have to say, Betsy McCoy calling ICE nice and really playing to President Trump is concerning, and I think will be concerning to people that watch this and listen to these interviews as they also make decisions about the governor's election, which is also this year.
Themis, a final in less than 30 seconds. Did you agree with Betsy?
I agree with her on some things. I disagree with her on some things. I mean, just because we're Republicans, we don't all agree, and we don't all disagree. I mean, I agree with some of the things the president's doing. I don't agree with how he's doing it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so this is where it's not about I don't like what you said, you don't like what I said. We all agree. We want to help people.
Does she
we
have
want
a
to make it
chance?
stronger. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for any Republican this year.
Okay. So we'll leave it there. As we've been streaming the Capitol Rundown, I do want to let you know that even though this program is ending in 60 seconds. Great Day Connecticut will be coming up. We will be breaking down all of these issues. We're staying here live at 4, 5, and 6 o'clock with our insiders as we'll take the 2 hours that you've just heard, or perhaps you joined us late, and we'll be breaking down all the issues that matter to you. We've summed them up: affordability, health care, and a lot of talk about homeschooling as well. Even some promises that will be brought up. So thank you so much for being with us. Former House Leader Themis Klarides, Jimmy Tickey, a Democratic strategist. Congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.
You ever want to run for office? Organizing to Win is a how-to. I'm Kara Sundlun. We want to thank you for streaming with us on WFSB Plus and watching us on the Wax. I'll see you back for Great Day Connecticut at 3 and Eyewitness News at 4.